Awesome. So that was really great. Thanks once again to everyone for showing up this morning. It's the final day of our People's Assembly. It's meant once again, we started with an information day and we're going to end with an information day. Council had committed to have the final day to talk about the LNG project and to make sure that you are updated on that following last year's assembly. So we have a very informal agenda today. I'm just going to let you know how proceedings will go. As I understand, we're going to start off with some words from our Tai Howard. Clishan will address the crowd, followed by Chief Councillor Robert Dennis. We'll have an update from Council Member John Judd on the 14 parts of the motion that were voted on last year. You'll see Steelhead has come to join us, so they will be making a presentation as well. Following that, we'll have an in-camera session once again, a session where our citizens and that can sit and just have some internal discussions. So that's where we're going today. The plan is to complete our business here by noon today. So if you have any issues, once again, remember that our Whitlock are in the room. I see Charlie Clappus, Doug Johnson, Harry Brousseau, I saw in here earlier, Jack Cook, Terry Nuquist. So if there's anything that you need, please make sure to let us know. Otherwise, thank you very much. Delicious breakfast to start our day, and let's get straight into our business by asking Clishan to come up and say a few words.
What a great day. I'm happy to see each and every one of you are foyer and give us a good day. I think that's a good thing to ask for. And ironically, that's what this song was talking about that we just sang. Clishan's prayer song says, the days are getting better now. Lift up the days. They're getting better now, and it says it over and over and over again. And our people are very powerful and spiritual in that way. And I just wanted to explain that song because it's important, because it's a belief of Foyet ancestors. Be grateful for each and every day as it comes. And now I want to introduce my Tai Hotwit, Clishan.
Good morning, everyone. What happened? The energy died down? No. Yeah. No, but seriously, we want to say welcome again. And it's been a huge success, being with each other and catching up with each other and meeting new family members. I think the energy is because of that. The day is ending and we're all going to go our separate ways. But we did a lot of good work, leading up to today. And we have the last bit of information that we want to share with our citizens. And I'm interested in seeing where we land in terms of the discussion that we're going to have. I want to welcome our guests and our friends to the room, and we also want to especially thank Chishot and Peoples Nation for allowing us to carry the business on throughout this weekend, and I think we've been real respectful to that, and I want to thank all of you for being respectful. I want to remind us of some of the presentations we've seen leading up to today that spoke very much of the responsibility that I have with me and my hotware. And it's to do with the very discussion that's going to be coming forward. And before we have that discussion, I want to just remind the Hoyt people about the presentations that we had in terms of what we brought to show you of why we have the stance and why our hereditary chiefs speak in a way of looking after, protect for future generations, protect our access, our resources, our environment. So we have no position in regards to what this opportunity is. our first and foremost position is to protect, look after, enhance our lands and resources, our people for future generations. That's our sole job here. So today we want to hear, and we're interested in hearing where our government is in regards to ensuring that our hereditary chiefs and our Hotway's interests are looked after and protected. Very much the reason why we brought the PowerPoint presentations we did to you yesterday and showed you some of the history just in that small little 7-kilometer circle that we have on the map. That's this one little area within our territory. And when we talk about what we have to look after as hereditary chiefs, our land, our environment, our resources, our people, if any of that is impacted, that's not a good thing for us. We got to make sure that whatever we're doing as a nation, that we're not forgetting and leaving our principles behind that are important to us, what our ancestors left behind for us. It's in our songs and our dances, it's in our territory, it's in our rivers, it's in our place names, it's in our names. So we want it to be just a reminder of what our position here is a lot different than what our elected government's jobs are. Our jobs on this side is to ensure that this is going to carry on and live on. That's the energy that is properly used. What we demonstrated, that's just a little tiny bit of the responsibility that we have. Ishuk, Salawak, Isak, and Kuwalsak are all in that song that we sang, and that's only one song. There's reasons why we have potlatches to explain and demonstrate what Ishuk, Salawak, Isak, and Kuwalsak is. And it's more than just an understanding of Isak is respect. It took us how long to sing that song, and we have many songs that describe respect, Isak, and Ishuk, Salawak. So that's the side that we come from. So the voice on behalf of my Hotway, working with my government, is always going to be that first. So we just want to be a reminder of that and welcome our guests and look forward to the presentation to see where we landed in terms of the work that's been done today. True.
Thank you very much, Kishan. We'll hear from our Chief Counselor, Robert Davis.
Uklama Mchawi, Huayata. First of all, thank you all for being here today. And the message that we've heard from our Tayi in his hot way, we have a really challenge before us. How do we balance those economic values with our traditions? And it is going to be a challenging road ahead. But at the same time, we have to pay attention to those of you that witnessed Ho'ayat First Nation 101 the other night. Noticed that there was 337 traditional use sites in a 7-kilometer area of the proposed project. We as the council now have to factor that in. What can we do moving ahead? Can we prevent some of those sites from being disturbed if we went ahead with the project? If the answer is yes, we'll find a way to do it. If these answers no, we'll have to really sit down with our partners and say what we got to do. And this isn't new. I had an opportunity of working up north, and sometimes we did run into where an interest was impacted by this proposed pipeline. So the pipeline company was called in. So to avoid impacting those interests, they rerouted their pipeline around that particular interest. So there are ways of doing it. And so that's what I mean, we're gonna find a really challenge of balancing our interests. I always knew when Sarita project was proposed, my immediate reaction was, oh no. Because we had experienced other forestry development in that area. And actually the forestry development had to really adjust their plans in order to log in that area. And that doesn't mean, oh no, don't do it. It just means, oh no, there's going to be a lot of activity disturbed, and how are we going to meet the challenges of avoiding them, avoiding impacts. And there is one thing that the Highway Council and the Executive Council have in common. And it goes like this: we have the responsibility of protecting spiritual sites. We have the responsibility of protecting treaty rights. And if we fail in that responsibility, we could be removed from office. So I will be keeping a close eye on that. And again, what I have said all the time is, as an individual who voted no last year, I didn't vote no to the project. I voted no because of the process at that time. And I think since then, things have improved dramatically. And that's where John will come in. And the work that John is doing now is starting to bring comfort to, at least to me, in what's being done. And then after hearing our Ta'i, in terms of giving us very clear, to me anyway, very clear instructions from the hereditary side. So we will look and try to find that. And then I encourage all of you to keep an open mind on this particular issue. And I also encourage that we're here all to provide an opinion. We're here all to provide a comment. We're all here to provide input. And let's respect when anybody wants to get up and speak from our community, that we hear both sides of it, because that's what I hear our Ta'i saying, that there are things that we got to factor into what we're doing. So with that, I just want to close with, as the Chief Counselor, I am honoring the decision of last year's Peoples Assembly. The last year's Peoples Assembly, and Jeff can help me if I'm wrong, but I understood that it was going to explore this project to see if it's something that we're willing to look at. And some work has been ongoing. John will explain that, and I believe Steelhead will explain some of the work that they're doing. And so keeping in the spirit of exploring the possibility of moving with this project, we want to respectfully hear from the presenters, and then also respectfully hear from our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. I think there's a PowerPoint, John.
Yeah.
Okay, if somebody's got the PowerPoint going, call John Allen Jack is going to talk about, he called me by my middle name this morning, I gotta get him back.
John Jackson Jack.
Okay, I'm just going to check and see that this PowerPoint works. So one thing you can do is that if you still have your large package, in tab 6, the annual report on page 17, actually it starts on page 16, but 17 is where we get to the conditions, and that's what I'll be talking about. Alright, I'm going to test this out now. There we go. Okay, it works perfectly. Okay, so, Angela, I was wondering if I could... Oh, it's a sample. Nothing has been lost. No noise involved. Okay. So, my name is John Jack, and I am an elected councillor with the Hawaii First Nation, as you know. But the reason why I'm talking to you here today is that I've been appointed the chair of the LNG Advisory Committee, which is the Citizens Committee that has been struck as a result of the People's Assembly from last year to oversee, or at least keep tabs on what's going on in regards to LNG on both on steelhead side, but also on the government side. Because the committee's job is to actually report to the People's Assembly every year, at the very least once a year, as well as the Hot Wheel Council and the government in regards to what's going on in LNG. So our committee has that responsibility. So I would like to just acknowledge them at the very least, and if they'd like to sit up front or stay where they are, that would be great. Not all of them are here today, but I'll start off with, well, I'm the chair. Cleishan, Derek Peters is a member of the committee as well as Clownhouse, Norman Dennis. If you want to raise your hand so everybody can see you, because you're here today. Thank you very much. And Brian Lucas as well. Sorry, I don't know your First Nation's name, but he's here as well. I don't believe Becky is here. I think she has to work today. But if Dwayne is in the room, if you could raise your hand to be direct. Oh, Becky is here? Okay, you're behind the post. I apologize. Oh, so she is here. So if you'd like to come up, if at all possible, Brian, if you want to come up and be recognized, that would be great, because these are your citizen members of the LNG Advisory Committee. Come on, you two. Are you still down? There we go. Yeah. And we do have two staff support, senior staff support for the LNG Advisory Committee. One is Karen Hogan, and the other is Sean Stanley, who is way there in the back. Karen's right there, making sure everything's working properly. So these are the members of the LNG Advisory Committee. These are people who will, at the end of the day, know entirely too much about LNG, and will likely be sick of it at some point in the near future. But these are the people to talk to as well. They'll know just as much as any of the members of council in regards to what's going on in LNG. So I did mention the materials already, but I thought I would give a quick overview of where we're at in regards to LNG, just as a backgrounder. This isn't anywhere in your report, it's just a refresher. There was a series of handouts, a good overview by the WIT in regards to where we're at with LNG. It was at the booth yesterday, or on Friday, I apologize. And we do have extra copies of that at some place. I do believe Heather is running to get them right now, so if you do want a copy, it'll be at the back table at some point. So, as Robert has reiterated, that we have agreed to explore the idea of an LNG facility at Sarita Bay. So we're exploring the idea, and that's an important thing to remember and understand, because this relationship started early in the previous year, 2014, started in early spring, and culminated in an announcement in July of an official relationship between Hoyt and Steelhead LNG, basically stating that we would agree to work together to explore the idea of an LNG project. So this is interesting, and this is actually very important, because other instances of large projects, and especially other large energy-related projects previous to this announcement, were done not at the front end of the project, but either right in the middle or right near the end of anything anything substantial. So I think we have to remember that this relationship started off in the right way before any company was really required to do so as a result of the Chilcotin decision that required that. So this was months before that decision. So this whole process culminated in an agreement by the People's Assembly to explore and approve the exploration of the project with Steelhead, based on originally 11 conditions, but that increased to 14 conditions. So how did we get there from here, or from the beginning? So if you remember back, there are roughly kind of 6 or 7 stages, depending on how you look at it, in regards to the development of the project, the exploration of the project, but even the eventual adoption of the project itself. So the first stage, which is what we kind of were in for most of 2014, was called the preliminary assessment stage, stage 1. So it was the exploration of the idea to a point where we were looking for any big showstoppers, anything that was a critical obstacle in regards to whether or not this was just feasible from looking at it from a desktop or looking at it from a map. And so that culminated in a report, and that culminated in the discussions and information sessions that we had that led to the People's Assembly. The result of that was that there were no showstoppers, there were no critical failures or critical threats in regards to at least exploring the idea from the perspective of more detail. So after the People's Assembly resolution and the conditions were attached to that exploration, we entered into the second stage, which is feasibility, which is what we're in right now. So the feasibility stage is when a description of the project is tendered, and then we go into kind of doing explorations of the environmental, the safety, the economic, the commercial, the environmental loads of studies that are required to ensure that the project could go ahead and that it would identify any potential impacts that would be happening as a result of it. So this is the stage we're in now. So let's pretend to go ahead into the future, into future stages, that all of these studies go ahead and it signs to yes, that we can go ahead. Well, what's the next stage? The stage after feasibility would be basis of design. So that's deciding, making the large decisions of what the project would look like, what kind of systems it uses, what its layout might be, and kind of deciding those large things. The stage after that is kind of a more detailed design stage. And that detailed design stage has an official designation. It's called FEED, which is an acronym for Front-End Engineering and Design. And nobody's waving their hands at me, so I think that's correct. And that's, like it sounds, more detailed design. So it's not just deciding what kind of systems or layouts, but rather deciding who's going to build it, who's going to provide the materials, and how long is it going to take. It's very detailed stuff. It's like going from a drawing of a house to the actual building of a house, and how complicated that becomes. Then it's not really a stage, it's more of like a time marker in regards to the development of the project. It's called final investment decision. So once FEED is either underway or near completion, the proponents of the project need to go out to the market and convince investors and financiers to back the project to pay for the construction of it, which is the stage after final investment decision. So construction would take some matter of months or years, and then we would go into operation. So that's the final stage of the project per se, but that's not the end. So there's kind of an 8th stage, which would be kind of decommissioning and reclamation. And that's something that's actually a condition, so I won't go too far into it right now. Okay, so we'll actually go into the conditions. So this is going to be a one-by-one kind of overview of what the conditions are. And if you have any questions, I don't know how slowly I'm speaking right now, but I don't want to take up too much time. But if there's anything that's unclear in regards to my explanation of the conditions, please raise your hand and we'll hopefully run a microphone out to you. I don't know who will do that, but that would be necessary if need be. So I want to be clear, and we want to be clear in regards to what's going on. But you can follow along in your annual report if you have it, and that will be basically what I'm looking off of here. Okay. Okay, there are 2 microphones, so we're in good shape. So there are 14 conditions that are attached to the People's Assembly motion. Like I said, these are actual conditions of whether or not we continue to go ahead and explore the project. So of these, I'll read them all out, and I'll give you a status report as to where we're at and what we think we'll be doing into the future to make sure that this goes ahead in a good way. Because one thing that we can do is, while we may not know if this project will ultimately go ahead, we do know that we can do this in the right way, and that's very important, because that's something that not only Kuwait is committed to and required by the people, it's something that Steelhead is committed to as well. Okay, so the first condition of the project is that it follows the core values of Izak, Hishak, Salak, and Uathlak, as defined in the 2014 Kuwait Economic Development Plan, throughout all stages of the project. So that includes exploration, construction, operation, decommissioning. All stages of the project must follow our idea of the core values. So that as it's being said, there are three core values, and if you were here before, there was a great overview by Wishki and Tisha in regards to that. But there is kind of a definition in the Economic Development Plan, and I'll quickly go over them because what we had to do is tie it to something, and that thing that it's tied to may not be the Economic Development Plan going into the future, but this is what we have so far, so I'll quickly go over it. And if I mispronounce anything or don't kind of reflect it well, I hope that Wishki will stand up or tap me on the shoulder, but only the shoulder. Okay. It's got the step. Okay. So the first core value by which we need to really follow is the concept of Isaac. So the way that it was stated at the Huayet 101 was that it was respect with caring. And that's very important to know. But as Wishki and Tisha and Robert have said in the past, it's more than just the word respect. It's the capitalized word respect. It's greater respect. It's a fundamental living respect for the relationship between the human world, the natural world, and the spiritual world. And all of those things that it kind of says in between. The most important aspect, at least historically, about Isaac, in terms of making decisions for a community, was that there were demonstrated acts of respect, and that those acts of respect needed to be acknowledged and witnessed in public. Because we lived in a society before writing, therefore all of the decisions, all of the agreements between the leaders of our nations needed to happen in front of the people so that the people would remember what those things were. If Clishan's ancestors made an agreement with one of the Barclay Sound chiefs for food exchange, that was a living treaty. That was something that needed to be remembered in our living memory for generations. It wasn't just something that was announced and would go away after people passed away. That ancestor's grandson might be the one who invokes that treaty, but since we didn't have written records, people needed to remember it. So it needed to be in front. That's why part of the reason we do our business in front of everyone, at least from a traditional point of view. So the next item is Hishut Salak, which is everything is one. So this is one of the pieces of ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge that our people have had for generations and generations going back thousands of years. It's the appreciation for the fundamental interconnectedness, interdependence, and reciprocal relationship between all things. So when I talked about Isaac, I talked about the three worlds, the human world, the natural world, and the spiritual world. Well, each of those worlds have thousands of things interacting with it, within each other and between each other, and they're all needed to work. It's called systems theory in science, and there are multiple different versions of systems theory in biology, in multitudes of different applications of science. But the conclusions that our wisdom and philosophy have followed for generations, modern science is just now catching up. So once again, it's how things are all interconnected, how one change at the top of a hill can have an impact on the fish in the ocean, and so on and so forth. Or how one spoken word at a meeting like this could have huge repercussions for politics 8 years from now. So that interconnectedness is important to appreciate and understand. And that interdependence is necessary too. Things rely upon one another in order to work properly. And that works in the human world too, in regards to economics, commerce, and trade. All countries lean on one another in the exchange of their goods and services to make people's lives better as a whole. And that's kind of one of the fundamental bases of international trade and the basis of LNG, in fact. And then all of the relationships that are talked about in that are reciprocal. They go back and forth. So it's a two-way street, and sometimes it's not equal all the time, but you'd be surprised how often those reciprocal relationships interact with one another. So I can't claim to understand how everything relates to everything, but we need to appreciate that there may be and do honest work in making sure that we have a good enough understanding as it relates to OIT and how it relates to LNG. So the third core value is uasnak, which is a verb, means taken care of. Now, there's kind of a two-level thing to this. There's our interpretation of what uasnak means, but then there's the Hatwia's interpretation, which is deeper, goes back more generations, and it's more living, per se. For our purposes, it means we're taking care of present and future generations. That means that we steward our people, our land and our resources, as well as our culture and values and traditions in such a way to ensure that we have enough or more for future generations. We don't sacrifice the future for the present. So under those values, that's a tall order. We have to apply all of those values and all of the things that I've just expressed and more going ahead into the future in regards to any economic development project, but especially LNG. So in regards to what we're doing and the status report on doing that, this is an in-progress condition, and this will always be in progress as long as there is some form of exploration of project. And so it's in progress. But the progress that we've made so far is threefold. We have held community updates in regards to what's going on with LNG in the past, and we will continue to do so. In fact, this is part of it. We have committed, the previous government and this government is committed to ensure that the Hatwia Council has sufficient resources to do all of the things that they hope to do, they want to do, and they must do. And so that's part of it as well. Because anything that has to do with land, resources, impacts, the Hatwia must be consulted. They must be just as kept up on what's going on. The third thing, which has actually happened right away, is the formation of the LNG Advisory Committee. So once we get to that, which is completed, but we feel that's an expression of our core values, to make sure that our citizens are just as informed as the government, as well as the Hatwia, and our administration as to what's going on. So you can see them as kind of an oversight committee as to what's happening, so that there are people who are more impartial than politicians or the administration involved in what's going on. So, whose responsibility is it to make sure that we hold to our core values? Well, technically speaking, it's likely everyone, so I would say it's various, but more specifically the Hatwia, our elders, and various aspects of our government, especially when it comes to our chief counselor, our speaker, and so on and so forth. So, what must we do to ensure that our condition 1 is fulfilled, that we hold to our core values? The first is to make sure that we ensure access to information, not only for government and administration, but also the Hatwia and our Citizens Committee, and that we give regular reports to the people as things go ahead. That's an expression of our core values. Make sure people know what's going on. Second, we must make sure that the relevant groups that need to have a function in this have access to funding. We need to ensure that the Hatwia are properly resourced to make sure that they can do the work that they want to do, as well as the stuff they need to do. And we need to continue to make a report, a status report at every People's Assembly, starting with this one, but any ones that may happen in the future as well, not just the regular one every November or December. Okay, so that's one condition, so I may want to move faster. Because I just realized that took like 10 minutes on one condition, and like no one wants to be here till 2 o'clock. So the second condition is that the proposed project carries out environmental best management practices and stewardship practices. So this is kind of defined in such a way that I'll give you the status report and then work from there. So this is in progress, as we all know. And that one of the formations of the progress is actually something that this government has done recently. So in the past, we used to have a lands committee, we used to have a natural resources committee, we used to have a wildlife committee and a fisheries committee. Well, in our discussions, the council has decided that we should think of it a little more holistically, a little more interconnectedly. So lands, natural resources, fisheries, wildlife have been wrapped up into a larger committee called the Hatwiya Committee, which is kind of more fitting in regards to how traditionally we thought about these things. We don't silo it all. Okay, we don't silo it all in such a way that people, I want to take forever, we don't silo things in such a way that they're all fisheries is just fisheries, wildlife is just wildlife. It's interconnected and we need to approach it as such. Second is that the Hotwea are involved and they must continue to be involved. And so what we need to do in the future is ensure that capacity and resources are there so that we can digest the environmental information and data as it comes in, because we need to have a good understanding of where our resources and lands are at so that we can make an informed decision. Third is that we need to have a net gain of cultural heritage values or traditional use areas through conservation and set aside. So this is in progress, and the progress has been the formation of the committee, involvement of the Hotwea, but the things that we need to do going ahead is we need to ensure that we have an understanding of what our cultural resources are and our heritage resources are, as well as our natural resources. We need to know what's there. We need to know how it's happening and make sure that we have a handle of what's there so that when we can understand the impacts of the project, we can ensure that there's sufficient mitigation, avoidance, or kind of replacement for a net gain. So the idea here is that there's a net gain of cultural value, so that whatever we lose, we don't just put back in, we put more back in. It may not be in the exact same area, but on the whole, in our territory, the plan is to have more. So if there is an impact on eelgrass, we must make sure that there is a plan to cultivate more eelgrass than what is lost. This is one example. So the next condition is that the acquired lands will be converted into treaty lands prior to the disposition of a lease or long-term interest. So before any of the project goes ahead in terms of construction or anything like that, we must make sure that the land is turned into our own treaty land. And this is actually something that's fairly easy to do, but we need to ensure that there is no mortgage or lease on it before it gets turned into treaty land. All it really takes is a letter to the BC government to do this, because those lands are already pre-approved in our treaty. So our land selection committee was very wise in the land that they selected, and that this is part of that. The next condition is that the proposed project is financially viable and rewarding to the satisfaction of its participants. This is kind of a two-part condition. So the first one is that the project needs to be financially viable, which means that the project needs to be set up in such a way that it's responsive to the market in regards to how LNG is being sold and where it's being sold and for what price. So we need to make informed decisions on choosing the right setup. Secondly, we need to make sure that the project is rewarding to the satisfaction of its participants, of which Steelhead and Hoyhead are part. So we need to, actually it's a condition in the treaty that we're both satisfied with how the deal will be going ahead into the future. So it can't be too one-sided, and it has to be in such a way that we can all agree to move ahead from a financial and commercial perspective in a good way. And that's in progress, and we just need to make sure that we have a good handle on our needs and wants, and that that's all of you, and we communicate that to council, and that we contemplate not just monetary benefits, but non-monetary benefits as well. The sixth condition is that the proposed project is demonstrably safe, which there has been progress on this. The preliminary report really spoke to safety very quickly, and that there were no showstoppers when it came to that, but there's more detailed reports that need to be done. And when Steelhead stands up and talks about the progress that's been made on their side, they'll likely provide more information. We just need to make sure that we understand and communicate any feasibility studies properly to not only the committee, the Hotwea, but our people as well, so that we all have a good understanding of what these studies mean, so that we can prove that it's safe or what needs to happen to make it safe. The seventh condition is that the proposed project through the Legacy Fund restores and advances the Sarita River and the marine and aquatic resources in the surrounding area, including the full return of the Sarita River salmon. So this is kind of tied to the net raising of cultural and traditional resources. But this bears special mention because the Cerrito River Valley and the Bay are very important to us, very, very important to us. So it's in progress, but there are some tasks that need to be done. And those tasks are, we need to identify the critical tasks in restoring the river, the resources, and the salmon. We need to know what we need to do the work. We also need to know, well, how are we going to know that we're successful at restoring the river, at replacing the fish, at bringing back the various resources involved in restoring the river and the bay. We need to know how we're going to count progress, because that's how we're going to do this. Once we know those things, we need to create a plan, create a budget, and then get to work. So planning needs to be done, but also information gathering needs to be done. But I think that we have the resources to ensure that we can do those things admirably. So the next condition from there is that the proposed project meets or exceeds regulatory requirements and achieves BC and federal government support through agreements such as the tax treatment agreement and the environmental assessment plan, but it's not limited to those things as well. Really what this means is that we're also a part of BC, we're also a part of Canada. We need to make sure that this project is agreeable and works within those regimes as well. So we need to make sure that we have to identify critical requirements in regards to tax, in regards to anything environmental or commercial, or any of the studies that are required under federal or provincial law. We need to make sure that we do those things as WIT, but we also need to make sure that Steelhead does it. This is fairly simple. The provincial and federal government have established systems for reporting out. We just need to make sure that we get our hands on those things, maybe translate them a bit, and present them to our government, HOPGA, and the people. The ninth condition is that the proposed project secures financing on commercially reasonable terms. So when I said FID, the decision to actually invest or go through and fund the project, we need to make sure that we go through and understand that there are proper ways of doing it. We go to the right financing companies, we fund it the right way, that it's not set up in a funny way that would scare off lenders or scare off investors. It's just it's kind of a motherhood piece. This is something that anyone would need to do in regards to any project, but it was wise to put it in as a condition. So really the future tasks there is to continue that we learn and understand how the financial markets work, the commercial markets work, and how the investing market works, so that we can create the best project possible if that's what we're going to do.
Don't be afraid.
Okay. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward from there. Condition 10 is also in progress, and then it says the proposed project establishes an independent reclamation fund to ensure that the land will be returned to a state acceptable to Kuwait or purposed for new projects, whichever is decided by Kuwait at the time. So this is something that we have agreed to in principle, but we need to actually hammer out the details of what that will look like. So the next task, I think, is to make sure that we have a detailed high-level concept of how the fund will be created, how it will be rolled out and governed, and all those kind of things. So that revenue from the project, once it becomes active, will be placed in a fund every year to make sure that by the end of the project's lifetime, there is ample resources to make sure that we can do the work to return it to a natural state, or to turn it back into whatever it is we think would have been there had the project not been there either. So that was just a guarantee. We needed to make sure that that was a condition, and it's there. The 11th condition is that the proposed project includes everything required for a customer to pick up an LNG cargo. This is kind of needs a bit of clarification, but our interpretation at that point is that this is a bit of a motherhood statement to make sure that the project is contemplating everything necessary to actually get a customer to pick up cargo and bring it back. It's just to make sure that the project covers every base and that we don't have, we haven't forgotten or not thought about anything. Okay, so the next three conditions I think bear special mention because they were added actually at the Peoples Assembly. That's great. We have 3 more left. I have 4 minutes. But they were added at the People's Assembly, and so that's why we have 14 conditions instead of 11. And so one of them has been completed already. That's the 14th condition. So I'm going to go right to that one. And that means that by March 31st, 2015, a special committee be struck to receive and review progress reports made to the Kuwait community in accordance with the previous subparagraphs and any related materials, and give advice concerning the proposed project to the People's Assembly, Kuwait Council, and the Hotwheel Council. So that's this committee actually. The LNG Advisory Committee is that committee. So what is it that they're doing or ensuring? So one of the things is condition 12 is the only item that I believe that the committee believes needs direct attention in the next little while. So the 12th condition is that the proposed project is subject to responsive and timely plans used to guide processes to consult with affected or neighboring First Nations, local governments, and regional communities in accordance with this definition of consult in the model final agreement with the amendments necessary to make the term applicable in this context. And that the proponents of the proposed project seek to have those plans integrated into any appropriate Kuwait, provincial, and federal processes in which the consultation is required. So one of the most important concerns that our people expressed at the People's Assembly last year was to ensure that we did this in the right way, not only between Kuwait and Steelhead, but Kuwait, Steelhead, and the Barkley Sound First Nations. Kuwait, Steelhead, and any First Nations that may be neighboring to us or affected by the project, as well as neighboring communities, Banfield, Port Alberni, the ACRD, to ensure that everyone is linked in and we all go ahead together on this in the right way. So this needs a bit of attention. We need to have a solid plan as to how we're going to make sure that we can integrate all of those things into our communications. So this is something where we'll work with Steelhead, but we do need to ensure that meetings with Barkley Sound First Nations, any potentially affected First Nations, as well as local communities are linked in there. So, the last condition, or rather the last condition I'll mention, is that the proposed project is subject to internal consultation processes within the Kuwait community, including regular progress reports to the community throughout the year, culminating in an in-depth status report and update presented at each regular People's Assembly held while the proposed project is in development, construction, or operation. And that this committee, the LNG Advisory Committee, would be giving that status report. So this is the first detailed status report that we'll be giving, but it's by no means the last or potentially the least detailed. So that being said, we need to make sure that there are regularly scheduled community meetings, as well as ensuring that the LNG Advisory Committee has access to speak to Council, speak to the People's Assembly, and speak to the Hotwheel Council. So that takes us to the end. And I'm not certain if there's time for questions. Hopefully that was clear in the explanation. But you do have your big package. So in tab 6 of the annual report, page 16, that's where the report starts. So I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I don't know that was 4 minutes. Is that with you? Oh, great.
Thank you very much, John. I don't want to try to rush, but I want to make sure that you have access to all of the information that is meant to be provided to you today. The Hotwheel have asked yesterday, in closing off, they had wanted to stand up the staff, and they were calling the staff up, so we want to give them a couple of minutes as we transition here before the Steelhead presentation to call the staff up. Clishan? So I think the staff are all gathered in the back. Clishan's bringing you forward, following up.
want to take up too much more of your time, but I would like to begin. I'd like to begin by, we wanted to stand up our organization. Would everyone look at them?
Anybody who's on committees too, you can come up.
Anyone, any part of our organization, committees,
Committee member.
contractor, Team Huet, basically.
Carrie? Oh yeah. Hey! Oh, yeah.
So as you can see here, to keep this well-oiled machine running smoothly, we need a lot of people power. And that's what Huet is fortunate to have. And on behalf of Tayi Tlishan and the Hotway Council, we want to formally stand you up and really applaud you for all that you do, because we know that getting ready for this weekend took a tremendous amount of work, and each and every one of you shined so bright and took that extra step so much. You know, there was no limits or no, that's not my area, that's not my department. It was just, it had to get done. And we see that. And also we talked on Friday night, and I want to say this again because I don't know that some of our customs, if they're clear or not, but when I'm talking for my Tayi and I have this and I say something, like I said on Friday night, you're all Team Huet, and when it comes down to our culture now, we want to say publicly and formally that if you're a part of Team Huet, you're welcome to take part in our song and in our dance and in our drum. And we're just going to have to figure out how we're going to do that in the future. And we wanted just to make that really clear, because there are some things that we take for granted maybe because they're custom to me, so that's how I view it. But we want you to know that you are a part of our team, and you help to bring us forward. And we really want for, there's not too many people left in the audience, but we want for our citizens, please put your hands together for Team Huet.
I want to, before we get on to the next presentation, I want to say some words on behalf of my Hotweh, our hereditary chiefs, in particular to the Ho'eit citizens, to the Ho'eit people. You know, I don't think we as a nation do enough to honor the hard work and recognize the people who do a lot of good things for our tribe. Recognizing that in this team here, I want to say that from behalf of our hereditary chiefs, we're putting our trust and faith into you, into the hard work that we have to do in terms of the good things that we got to do for our Ho'eit people. And it's not just about people, it's about our identity, our cultures, our songs, our traditions, our names. And that's never to be forgotten or misunderstood. This is our energy properly used. And I want to share with the Hawaii people, recognizing that there's challenges in building a team. I recognize that as the head chief of this tribe. And it's important for me to do whatever I can with my hereditary chiefs, with our culture, our songs and traditions, to educate, to help understand why some of our people come with anger, come with hurt. We all shared and seen the presentation that talked a little bit about of the history in our nation and the intrusions that we have encountered in our lives. Today, why some of us stand with anger. Some of us today, when we sing those songs, there's still a little bit of anger inside of me, because I know that there was a government out there that was trying to strip us from who we are and what we stand for. And it's been a challenge moving forward as a nation. We're growing so fast. Our population is pushing 800. And we were starting to grow away from our cultures and traditions. I felt when I came in here last year, it didn't feel strong, and the energy never felt good. The outcome of that is we need to understand each other more. We need to learn. And the Hawaii 101 that we did is just a small sample of the little bit of history that we have. So I wanted to, in front of the Hawaii people, we should all put trust in amongst each other here. And out here too. Because we all have to share in the growth of our nation. And we all have to share in the failures in our nation as well. And the good thing about it is we're doing it. Look at all the Hawaii people here, all the generations we got. Hishuk, Sawak, Isak, and Ualthak are starting to mend us. And I'm committed to making this team a stronger team and putting trust and faith into our Hawaii team, not only into our Hawaii team, but our citizens as well. So we're making really big strides in terms of helping each other understand one another. And it's not only the non-Hawaii people that work for us, it's our people as well that are still learning and understanding who we are. And that we should never misunderstand what our culture and our traditions mean and what they stand for and why our Hawaii have the positions we have. And we need to work together on that. And I'm committed to that. And I'm proud of the work that all of you have done. And I'm proud where we are as a nation. Let's embrace that and build on that. And let's renew our strength and our courage. True.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if any of you know, but I was the former elected council of last 4 years. And I just want to also pass on my appreciation for all the staff and committees and people. These are the people behind the scenes. You know, I know they sometimes it's tough for them, but I know in my heart that every one of them is working for you, First Nation, for Hawaii, for the benefit of all of us, not just for your benefit. I just want everybody to know that. I've always supported them, and I will continue to support you, whatever your capacity. As a former leader, I know it's tough sometimes to face the public. In any institution, it's always like that. It's our front end staff that take the brunt of the abuse. And I applaud you for hanging in there, and I really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate what you've done over the last few years and will continue to do. I know I know all of you are here for our benefit, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Yasua. The example that I want to use for the people that work for us, I want to draw a parallel. You see, sitting here today, the Ha'oi of the Hawaiian First Nation. Many of us Hawaiian will support what they're doing unconditionally. If they came to us and asked us for help, we come forward. As a matter of fact, most of the time, we're not even asked to help. I know many of you in this room, when any of our Ha'oi are doing anything, you just say, what can I do to help you? And so for those non-Hawaiian, we want you to embrace that part of our culture, because it really helps us when we work together. And we just want to say, and I really want to repeat Jeff's word, I want to thank each and every one of you for the time and effort that you've given to support the Hawaiian Nation, to work hard to make it better for Hawaiian. And as we heard the other night, as we heard our Ta'i say, some of our people are not well off as others. And those are the ones we really need to help. If they need help, what can we do to help them? It may be more education, it may be more training, it may be something that we don't know, but what can we do? Sometimes it's this. Getting together like this, supporting each other, lifts other people up. The Ta'i singing a song today, I'm lifted now. When you really get to feel that song, that's exactly what it is. You feel lifted. And those of in this room that know that song, when it's sung, I've actually heard some of our people say, I just feel like crying, because that's how they feel. They're feeling uplifted when they hear that song. So we're glad to share it with the rest of our Team Hawaiian. That's who we are today. Team Hawaiian, all of us. Chew.
Dance too fast. They said we're trying to keep up with the pace of the meetings. So I think it was in tape. Okay, so I've asked Steelhead to come up and be ready to get right on with business. Our time, we're at 11:19. Karen tells me that very soon there's going to be the draw. They're going to be drawing the numbers for the 2 laptop computers. So anyone who has not turned your clickers in, the last I heard there's 4 of you. Two people. So if you haven't done that, you won't get a ticket, you won't be part of the draw. They're going to draw in about 15 minutes. So if I can just ask everyone to get yourself settled once again. And I'd like to welcome representatives from Steelhead LNG. I saw them last year. That's the last time I saw them, so good to see them again. And it looks like Nigel Zemko, the CEO, will be making a presentation. So welcome, Nigel, and welcome to the team.
Good morning. First of all, it's a great privilege to be here again, and thank you to the Ha'oi for inviting us here today, and the Chief and Council, and of course everybody from Kuwait and from Team Kuwait. think that's a very good feeling. So thank you for inviting us. I remember last year it was a long People's Assembly for me last year, as you can imagine, and but it was a very emotional day for lots of people. We said at that time we'll come back to you and explain what we've done this year, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Is there a clicker? Oh, thanks. Just before I do, I'd just like to introduce the Steelhead team that we have here. First there's Tiffany Murray. Just stand up, Tiff. Tiffany Murray really likes French toast in the mornings, I discovered today. And then there's Ernest Buchan, who is our head of technical. So any complicated questions he's going to answer for us today, and maybe add to it. The only problem is you might not understand what he's saying because he's got a Scottish accent. And then Victor Ojeda, there's a very complicated background to his life, but he's our president. Victor wasn't on board a year ago, but he is now, and he's certainly running the business with the rest of us on a leadership team. Victor used to be the managing director of LNG Canada, which is a Shell project up north, which is going to have a whole bunch of problems into the future, because Victor's not there anymore. That's why a whole bunch of problems. First thing, we were privileged to be here a little earlier today and hearing the speeches from Hatwia and from the LNG committee. It's great to see a consistency of the values that we're trying to run in this project as Steelhead. We try our best to respect everybody we deal with, and respect with caring is a really good way of saying it. We do that to the best of our ability. Sometimes we perhaps don't get that exactly right. We're dealing with lots of people, and sometimes we don't communicate that right to our people. But we do our best, and we'll get better at doing that. Hitsak Sawak is almost my favorite value. Everything is connected, and particularly in LNG. I apologize, I haven't been to Port Alberni or down to the site as much as I should have been, because I've been traveling a fair bit. Part of exploring the opportunity in LNG is you have to understand, is there going to be a market for your product? Over the last 12 months since we were here, the world commodity prices has fallen dramatically. We've all seen a benefit in that, and our trucks are slightly cheaper to fill up. But there is a downside of that in that the price for LNG is significantly lower than it was a year ago. So we now have a colleague in Beijing, Jiang Lu. He's a Steelhead guy in Beijing. We have Hidetoshi Otsuka. He's in Tokyo. And we have a lady called Pat Roberts in London, looking at markets for LNG for Steelhead. And sorry, can you hear me at the back? Is that okay? Good. Right. So we've been running around a bit, and I've just been basically overseas for about a month, talking to companies in China, for example, and many other places. We have on our list of customers around 150. We have tier 1 customers, maybe around 20. Of those tier 1 customers, we're talking to some very seriously at the moment. But in China, we're talking to one of the biggest coal companies in the world. Now, they have a real problem because coal is going out. Coal is too polluting, it produces too much greenhouse gas, and it produces particulates, which produces poor air quality. And they're trying to get out of it. And if we can work with them, that will effectively reduce coal-fired generation, increase gas-fired generation, so improve the air quality overseas, as well as them being able to pay a good, fair price for the product. So in terms of exploring the opportunity, I think at Steelhead we're doing our side of that. We still have more to do, but I'll talk about some more detail as we move forward. Okay. Oh. Left and right? There we go. Okay. All right. No, I can't see the slide from here, so I have to lean forward. Okay. Okay, so this is the agenda, and we're going to briefly talk about everything that's on the slide that I can't see from here, which is good. So let's move. Can you just... Okay, there we go. We're in the feasibility phase, and in terms of our technical work, there are two main areas of that on the site. One is traditional use, which has been mentioned before by Hatwia, and I understand the spiritual linkage to that. We are working with, as closely as we can do, everybody on the Huait side to understand the traditional use of the site and the surrounding areas. We have bought into the values of Huait as our project. So any traditional use issue that comes up will be addressed in one way or the other by the project. That obviously, inputting into that, the Hatwia will have a major ability to do that, and we will listen and follow that as closely as we possibly can do. We'll also obviously work with the Chief and Council and the LNG Committee in understanding that in detail, and the experts that the Huait feel are the most appropriate for us to talk to so we can understand it. In terms of environmental work, we've been looking at many studies this year. Some of the studies that have been done already on the area include surface water, air quality, so we're monitoring the current air quality. So the idea of these baseline studies is that once we know what's there today, when the project's running, we can understand if there's any differences and then take steps to correct for that. Obviously, noise is important, so there will be noise from the facility if it's constructed, and so we need to know what the baseline noise is. Are there any contaminated sites that are there at the moment? We're looking at meteorology, so temperature, wind, rainfall. And we've also had one marine resources reconnaissance study done, and there will be more of these being developed. In the summer, we're looking at terrestrial field studies, and they were postponed. We were going to do that last summer, but there was logging activity from island timberlands, which meant that we couldn't safely operate. We didn't want to put people in the field while the guys from the timber company were there at the same time. It wouldn't have been appropriate, and we could have had an accident. And as you know, safety is very, very important to us. Okay, the feasibility phase that's on there is the next phase of our project. And we'll be looking to go into that as soon as we can over the next 12 months. And I'll be expecting to step up our activity in studies, but in particular, as I said, understanding the traditional use study work that's ongoing so we can integrate that. One thing that has happened this year is that we have been working with Huait citizens, and we have at the moment actually, we counted up the amount of work that Huait citizens have done on the project so far. It's about 300 hours worth of work. That's actually quite a lot of time and effort. So we're looking to obviously increase that in the future. But for everybody that goes on site, we work with the Huait government, and we have a contract with the Huait, with the HDC, who help us in getting support on those projects and who actually goes on site. Would briefly like to talk about the generation fund. Now, I can't I can't do this from here. Can I have another little microphone? There we go. Oh, it's that. Oh. Okay, this works. I feel better here anyway. Okay, the Generations Fund, this was signed in March 2015, and this is the idea of this fund. It starts small, but it will grow in the future. And the idea, very simply, was how can Steelhead support the Hawaii government in developing and supporting the quality of life for Hawaii members. So what we've tried to do is set this fund up. It is managed and administered by the Hawaii Chief and Council. The idea is that the fund will grow and develop over time. So it's not just for now, it will be for the entire life of the project. At the moment, there are 3 core elements. Oh, am I? Okay. Okay, right. Okay, is that better? Okay, good. At the current phase, the fund is worth $1.5 million, and we've currently done, out of that, the Hawaii has decided to do the food box program. There's that great little truck that came out of it as well. The Banfield-Anakla Trail is part of it. The Trades Discovery Program, including a site to the Mount Hayes LNG facility on Vancouver Island, which is already there, and some other funding, including the Hawaii Bus. Our aim is that the Generations Fund, as the project progresses, there'll be more investment in the project means more investment in the fund. So there is a channel by which there's a very close correlation between what the project's doing and the Hawaii directly. In 2015, we have slowed up a little bit. There were various changes in Hawaii, including an election, and us as well. We also wanted to really understand the traditional use work before we charged ahead. We felt that was absolutely imperative to get right at the beginning. And we're currently developing a joint implementation plan with the conditions on, and the committee is definitely part of that. So we'll be able to make sure that we're following what the committee's concerns are, and we've certainly learned a lot today, even as well. I briefly talked about the global market. So what's happened here is that there's the drop in oil price, drop in LNG price has happened. There's increased supply. Australia's gone and produced a lot of LNG. And we're looking at smaller quantities, potentially, than we did in the first place. Not ultimately, but our idea is rather than one big project, we might have a step up of projects. In that way, the risk is lower on a step-by-step basis, so investors are more ready to invest. The impact on the market is lower, but you still get to the right place at the end of the day. What that's done is we've had an increased focus on cost competitiveness. So with our contractors, we're giving them a really, really hard time in getting the cost down of any development. But we're also looking at, and this is where Ernest is spending a lot of his time, is really looking at the site, the location. Is there anything we can do that reduces the environmental impact, the overall footprint, and can also be more cost competitive? We've got a fair few ideas on that, which we're still developing. It's not quite the time to talk about them today, but we will be working on that over the next few months. But the great thing is, whichever way we look at it, Sarita is a very strong site. It's a great location, and we're absolutely committed, as we were a year ago, to make this happen. You will have heard in the press that we're also looking at another project on Vancouver Island. This is the Malahat LNG project. The reason that we started looking at another project was because the biggest issue we have in the Sarita project, it's a long way from where the gas is. So we've got to put a long pipeline in. So our thinking was, if we put a long pipeline in, can we put a small project halfway along that pipeline to help pay for it? And that's what we've managed to do. So the key thing for us is not necessarily, and the key thing for Sarita is not necessarily Malahat LNG project, but the fact that Steelhead has signed an agreement with a US company called Williams to look at a gas pipeline, and we're spending many millions of dollars working with Williams today, designing a gas pipeline to come across to Vancouver Island. That gas pipeline will be extended to Sarita. That actually means that in terms of exploring the LNG project, the biggest risk we had was pipeline. We have made massive steps forward in that department. The fact that we've been working with the Malahat helps that considerably along the way. So for us, the biggest risk was pipeline. We've now made significant steps to reduce that risk, and that has made the Sarita project a lot more likely to go ahead. What we've done with the Huait First Nation, this is the site, by the way. It's a 100-year-old industrial site. It's an old concrete factory used to be there. And we're putting these floating units next to the coastline. It's not land-based. We're putting the liquefaction on these large barges. They sit on the water, and then a ship comes alongside, takes the LNG, and then goes away again. We've been very lucky enough to work with the Malahat First Nation, and we have signed a mutual benefits agreement with them and a lease on the land. Again, they purchased the land. We helped them purchase the land, and the long-term lease supports that into the future. The mutual benefits agreement and long-term lease are 30-year agreements with the Malahat First Nation. So that will take us all the way through the development of the Sarita project as well. So if you think about it, the pipeline goes to Malahat, and then we'll go to Sarita, and Malahat are helping pay for the pipeline that comes to Sarita. That was our idea, and we're well on the way to making that happen. Up here it says the IGC, that's the Island Gas Connector, which is the name of the gas pipeline that we have with Williams. And here's a little map. I'm going to get close to this now. So here is the gas pipeline. The natural gas sits up here. This is obviously British Columbia. This is Alberta. This is where the natural gas comes from. And there is a pipeline, currently existing pipeline, that comes down here, this green line. There's another pipeline system that comes down here that comes across the southern part called Southern Crossing. And they all come together at a place called Huntingdon on the BC side, or Sumas on the US side. And then the idea is that we build these pipeline across here. And this is the first pipeline here. It's 120 kilometers. And then we'd have to get from Malahat to Sarita. That's about 130 kilometers. Don't know what that route is yet, but the first bit to get right is this bit that we're focusing on now. But this is being designed with the idea to bring enough gas to go to Sarita as well. So that's how our thinking is on the pipelines. And the reason is, you can see this distance here is a lot smaller than this big distance here. This is the Kitimat area. This is the Prince Rupert area. With the low commodity prices that we see today, these large projects have big question marks next to them. Are they going to be economic? But because we have a very short pipeline here, relatively, all the way to Sarita, with this existing infrastructure in place, we believe we can actually get lower transportation costs than the projects up north of getting gas to Sarita. That's pretty much what I've said before, just zoomed up a little bit. So let's just talk quickly about what's next. What's next is that we'll be doing a lot more environmental studies, and this gives you a list of exactly what we're doing there, and everything will come up to see that. Again, traditional use study is a key part of that, where we're at, and we understand a lot of work's been happening on that in parallel here. We'll work on what the proposed concept is. As you can see, there are some different concepts that are being developed. We still believe it works here, and we will continue to engage as we have been doing and follow the environmental assessment process. So next year, well, this year coming up is going to be more of the same, working hard at that. We'll also be working very hard with the Kuwait Chief and Council to understand what kind of arrangements should be in place between Kuwait and the project to both our benefits and that follow all the values over the next 12 months. I think that's pretty much everything covered. Yep, got nods from the guys, so that's good. But I'm very happy, and we'll all be very happy to take questions.
I heard from you that, and maybe I didn't hear correctly, but I heard you say that you're not sure what the project's going to be yet. So even to the People's Assembly, you can't say what it's going to be, except that, if I understood John correctly, that we're proceeding on, believe it's condition 5. I believe that's the one that's. So when do you figure you'll know, when you can say, hey, this is what we're going to do, because it's not good to leave us hanging because we don't know what you're going to do. You know, like, it's important for us to get on with our work too. Like, we don't want to delay doing any planning with our lands if there's something else we want to do. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very fair question, Robert. What we're looking at doing is there is still the opportunity of the base plan that we've always talked about, which is the land-based facility. But what we've managed to see and learn in the last 12 months is there are also possibilities with floating facilities as well as land-based facilities. Now, the benefit of a floating facility is that obviously it has a lot lower impact on land, but it also has an impact on the size and the scale and the economics. So what we're doing is trying to understand in a very open way what possible combinations there could be of all those factors. So once we have that, which should be in the next few months, we'll certainly be working very much with the joint committee that we have with the Kuwait government and sharing those as much as we can do.
Okay, thanks. Just one more question then too, and it is related to, now that you mentioned the word floating facility, one of my biggest concerns as a Hawaiian citizen is that the significant impact that it's going to have fishery values. I mean, that's going to be the big one. And so it's going to be really important we know what the design is. Certainly if the area is a really large area, we could effectively be removing some very important fishing areas for our fishermen. And that's one thing we definitely don't want to do. Okay, thank you.
Maybe if I can just comment briefly on that. Yes, which is one reason why we're being very careful, Robert, is to understand the impact that would have and the potential impact that would have.
It's a question for Benson Nookmis.
Thank you. My concern has always been same as our elected chief. and I've brought that forward at our table many times to do with our fishing and our fish in Sarita Bay area. You may correct me, Robert, if I'm wrong. We had spent over $1.2 million to try and bring that Sarita River run alone back to the way it used to be. I know that it'll never be the same it used to be when I was growing up there over 75 years ago. I've seen what the damages that the logging company had done to our area there, not only to do with spring salmon and the other species. The only species that don't get there is sockeye. And that has always been my worry. And we still live off the resources from Sarita Bay area, not only salmon, also shellfish. And I seen the pictures that you presented last year where that thing is going to be. And I have dug clams myself right beside where you said the machinery is going to be. It's right next to it, right by the corner there. And I've dug clams there as late as 7-8 years ago myself. And my next worry is I know a little bit about refrigeration. I had a trawler, and I had installed a freezer unit in my trawler, and my wife had fished with me over the last few years that we fished. And my friend here in Port Alberni helped me install that freezer unit. So I have an idea what goes into plants and freezer units. You talked about freezer units or some kind of a compressors in that place. And I remember installing that freezer unit. There was an oil separator. There's an amount of oil that goes through the whole system. And it's for some things that's connected to the freezer unit, and it comes back to the oil separator, and it oils it as it goes along in a freezer system. And my worry is, I don't know, I stepped out of the room when John Jack was doing his presentation. I'm not sure if it's included in that 10 or 11. As I went to talk to my nephew, our head chief, in the other room about some things that I was concerned about, and I told him about it. And I said, you said when you met with Huayat last year or whenever it was, that this unit is going to be in operation for 25 years, is that right? 25 to 30 years?
Yes, it is.
So
if it goes ahead.
If it happens. So what my worry is when that happens, I can see the damage that it could do to our resources in Sarita Bay. If that stuff that, when you're finished with it, are you just going to leave it there, or are you going to take everything out of there and leave it as it was before you got there? That is my next worry, is if all that stuff is left there and starts to rot and rust away, and all that oil and all that stuff is going to go into Sarita River and Sarita area and ruin all our resources that we depend on as Huayat people. A lot of us don't live there anymore, but we still get our fish from there, food fish, to do with sockeye and stuff, because they come through there when they're going to Kildonan or Port Alberni here. So that is my other concerns to do with that plant being there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your concerns. It'll be great to be able to spend some time talking about some details of the question points that you raised, but maybe I can just say a couple of comments. The first thing is on the Sarita River. One of the conditions that obviously Steelhead is fully supportive of is the fact that we use some of the Generation Fund money to reinvest in the Sarita River to get it back to the way it was. And we see that as a critical part of the project. Not just an adjunct, but actually a key part of that. And the reason for that is that that will create a legacy for the project, which will be a positive legacy in the fact that hopefully it will reintroduce significant salmon up the Sarita River that has not yet been successful, regardless of some of the great work that's been done to date. So for us, that's very much part of that into the future. In terms of your example of the refrigerant and the oil trap that's in there, you do need to use different types of materials to put in the refrigeration unit. It's not oil per se that we use, but we can talk to you in more detail about exactly what that is. There is, within BC, the BC process and the federal process, these guys have been looking at this kind of study, this kind of plant now for about 4 or 5 years in detail. They have a lot of expertise, and they make absolutely sure that if you ever get a permit to use these facilities, any potential risk is understood and managed, and everything that's in place will protect that incredibly important fishery area that we have. And finally, just with location, clearly we will do all the work possible to locate these facilities, to understand the impact that these will have on both the marine and the land area into the future. We have to understand that. We'll do it completely openly, and everybody should contribute to that debate, including yourself, of course. And your input would be very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, yes. And I think there's also another condition about what happens at the end of life. One of the conditions is that it either goes back to like it was, and we will take everything away and put it back to exactly how we found it in the first place. Or, depending on what the Huait want to do, they might want to do something else and leave some things there, but that would be a Huait decision at the end of the process. One thing I did forget to say, though, is that the project was awarded an export license for 24 million tonnes this year, and so it's by the federal government, and so obviously that's a very positive thing for the project.
Harry Bresso. Right behind you, Edward. Oh, you knew.
One of the things I would like to ask about is, you see all these gas companies either laying off mass workers or shutting down. Is there going to be some kind of contingency fund in case you start construction and then 2 years into it the money's washed up? Are we going to be left with footing the bill for the cleanup for the project that is never going to get finished?
Yeah, that's a fair comment. There is one project in particular in the oil sands that Shell started and then they've stopped halfway through. Again, one of the conditions that you see here is that the project is strong enough to attract project financing. That project financing will only be given if the investors are happy to put all the money into the project. So that will go ahead. We will get project financing. We'll make the opportunity the decision to invest if everything else goes well. The money will then be there, and the money will be spent building the facility. Once the facility is fully constructed, then it will run according to whatever's required. The other thing we're doing to protect ourselves is what can happen is the market can disappear, okay? But what we will do is we'll enter into long-term contracts, 20-year contracts, which are binding on the customer to take LNG for that length of time. So the project will run for at least 20 years. Your question is really what happens after that? Would it be extended? But that's yet another decision that will have to be made into the future. So the way which we'll set this up means that with long-term contracts, project financing, which will be long-term as well, everything's agreed at that point. Price is agreed, and everything's there. The other way of thinking about it is today's market's a very low price. If we're economic at this low price, which we believe we are, we have a very competitive project on the global scale, and that is true. This is competitive, not just in BC, but compared to other projects around the world. This is a lot better project than any new project in Australia, for example. So if you think of it like that, we're in a very good place competitively, which means that this project should go ahead before any other Australian project. And because of that, you feel quite confident that the project will go ahead. That's certainly the feedback we're getting from investors, and it's certainly the feedback we're getting from customers.
Okay, so you're not going to start construction until you have every single dollar available to build the facility. We're not going to be building it in advance and waiting for the funding to come in as we progress.
That's right. The only bit that might be built in advance is some infrastructure, maybe roads, maybe something like that, maybe some site clearance. But that would be the only thing that would happen. But then again, that would have to be agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, final question from Marlene, and then we're under a little bit of time. We're going to have lunch in, so somebody can bring a mic over to Marlene. Melanie, I'm sorry. So just a little public service announcement. We are getting close to noon, so people should have checked out of their rooms by now. We know that some people are going to have to leave to be getting on the bus pretty soon. We are going to have some lunch brought in about 20 minutes. We're still looking for one clicker, and we're going to be doing a draw when Steelhead is finished here after they've responded to the question. Thank you. Oh, they're all returned, somebody said.
Going back to our traditional uses with a lot of things, not only like the lands, but the oceans. I look at our global today, and when we look back, we had so much value because we had so much water running and flowing for our streams to keep our fish going. And then when you look at what happened this past summer and how low and how much water restrictions that we had. So I hear you guys saying that you're going to be doing all you can to get the streams running again. But from a realistic point, and when you look at what's happening now with what El Nino, whatever that's supposed to really mean, happening, like you can look in the future and you could say, yes, this is what we're going to do. But we also have to have that whole the global warming that they say that we're experiencing coming down in order for that to happen. So I can hear that you really want to help us with that. But we have to actually have like the water coming back. And when you look at how the logging system works, and when you look at different countries, I studied some global studies a couple of years, like about 4 or 5 years back. And I looked at Africa, and they were basically, I consider it an invasion because they clear-cutted all their lands because they thought they were going to make lots of money, but they didn't know that they were losing out.
Yeah.
And you look at, and I've been really looking into our medicinal traditions, and I've become so aware of the water, so much so aware because I live on a well, and without rain, there's no water. And with how hot the weather has been getting, and you look at all the logging, I'm not a protester against logging or anything, but a lot of that, the more you cut away, the more you're taking away from our rainforests, which brings in the rain to help our salmon start running on the streams. And if we don't have that, I think it would be more fair to say, okay, I would like to do this depending on the global economy, on how our rain and our water levels are going to come up, and how the drought is going to just disappear. And we can't commit to that, and we can't say that that's going to happen 4 years from now. And with the traditional medicines that we look at, I've been looking into it a lot more lately, and it's become something that a bother to me, like thinking with LNG, okay, this is where you guys are, and our resources, part of our traditional resources is natural medicine, and that's what we get from the forest. That's what we get given back to us. And that's part of our health, that's part of our tradition, and that's part of something that's gonna keep us from getting sick if some things are cut away from us. So my question to you is, do you have insight or information along that with your research that you guys are doing now? I know that we don't really have somebody who studies, I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, if we have somebody who actually knows traditional medicine. It is so hard to really get into it. And it takes a lot of research, and it takes a lot of work, and a lot of commitment, and a lot of dedication. And I have just been really into it lately, but I've just become aware too, we're not always going to have the pharmacies there ready and available to us. So if you don't have that knowledge, or somebody doesn't have it, I think that should be brought in, because some of that traditional medicines that we have in that area need to be protected.
Thank you for that question. Certainly part of from my perspective, part of traditional use includes any medicine that is associated with the land that is there. And maybe Tiffany can have a chat with you after this. I don't want to keep people here too long, about specifically what that means and any ideas you might have, and bring that into the study. But we'd like to understand that in a lot more detail, for sure. Just one final comment on greenhouse gases. LNG plants do emit greenhouse gases. Natural gas does emit greenhouse gases. But our goal is to replace coal-burning power stations, which emit twice as much greenhouse gas than natural gas. So the great thing about an LNG project in Canada is you're not only improving the global emissions by getting greenhouse gas down and particulate emissions, so improving air quality as well, which kills a lot of people in the world in different countries, but you're also improving the local environment here, if we get it right, with things like the Sarita River, plus you're generating wealth for the Hawaiian Nation and Canada itself. So for us, that's how that works.
Thank you.
So, sorry, Michelle just brought up something that, sorry. See, yeah, okay. I took global studies in school too, so it's good to hear that you've taken the same type of thing. But one thing that Yahlua and I think Robert had been talking about in the past is that when you're talking about forest resources and what is there, it's not just the timber, right? It's also the medicines, the mushrooms, all of the other types of things that you can go out and get. And I think that's important to remember. Yahlua told me just to remind everyone that a lot of the damage that was done to the Sarita River Valley was as a direct result of poor forestry practices, road building in the wrong places, and that the detrimental impact that had to the forest and the stream itself. So one of the potential things, and actually one of the conditions of this project, was so that money would be set aside to protect the land, to heal the land back to where it was, to make sure that, well, I don't know anything about traditional medicine, but one thing that I think we can all agree on is it should be preserved so that it can be studied. And so one of the conditions of the project was to ensure that not only the river was to return, but all of the things, all the damage that was done was to be repaired and healed so that there can be those resources. So also, one of the conditions was the Generations Fund, which has a health component. So there could be funding for studying that in the future as well. So that's something that can be addressed as a result of the project. So anyway, thanks.
Robert. Yeah. There you go. Takes 4 seconds. It's all right. Leave it. It'll be fine.
Hello?
There you go.
Yo, cheating hard. Oh, well. The other important element to the matters that you've raised is that we, the Hawaiian First Nation, will be asking to participate in a traditional use study, hopefully which will identify the very things that will actually get down to locating where they are. And then once we've done that and completed the traditional use study, and here's what I do suggest, by the way, in terms of the traditional use study for that area. I do know, for example, that John Moses, Jack Billy, Simon Dennis, Alec Williams, Simon Williams, Mike Williams, Andy Clappus, Willie Sport, Bobby Sport, Victor Williams, Bill Frank, those families all lived in that area. So it's going to be really important to interview those people, because they're the ones that probably most utilize all these other things that you're talking about, whether it be medicine, berry picking, getting water, spiritual sites, or whatever it may be. So the thing will be that we'll conduct that traditional use study, and that we would like you to be part of that in terms of, you know, are we gathering the information that's satisfactory? Then once we find the information, what are we going to do so that those things don't get impacted, those traditional uses don't get impacted? And the big word they use, and I never understand, that they'll introduce mitigation measures to, that's a fancy word, technical word, but really what they're trying to say is that they'll introduce some way to avoid the impact on those interests. Does that help you? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. We still are going to be moving into an in-camera, and we've had a chance to hear from Steelhead. Thank you very much. And to have some questions directed to them. There will be more opportunities, I'm assuming. I think we are going to move into in-camera. We're getting close to, or we're afternoon actually, so I think that Karen has arranged to have some lunch to come in for us. So on behalf of all of us here, I want to thank the Steelhead representatives for coming and joining us today, and wish you a safe travel home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't run away just yet. On behalf of Tlishin, the Hatwe, and all the people of Hawai'i, we have some acknowledgments that we'd like to share with each of you. The Heart of the People, the Return of the River, Voices of the Elders, and
Thank you very much.
each get your own copy.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, so Nigel and his team are going to be in the coffee shop there for a while, so feel free if you have some questions for them to go sit and have a cup of coffee with them after we're done with our business here. Most important business today, we have a draw, and Karen, our acting executive director, is getting set up here to do the